Alright, hi everybody. I'm going to do something a little different today. We're over here, this used to be where, we park an RV, and well, we got rid of that, and he's going to convert this into part of his shop. And the shop's on the other side of this wall. You can see where it's air conditioned in there. And we have a pretty nice little machine shop, and we're going to start converting this over to a work area too. But what we're going to do, you can see here's the old compressor tank, and he's getting paranoid about it potentially leaking or some catastrophic damage, not knowing if that can hold up the air pressure on there. And here's the old pump. We already took it off and had a new motor on it, so that would be going back on. And you see here's the new tank. We have it on its side, and he gave it a little paint job there. So today we're going to clean this up, take it apart, and we've got the rebuild kit over here. So we don't know, this thing is really old, and we don't know the last time it was rebuilt. Looks like there's some slight oil leakage, not bad at all though, and it never, it's always performed very well, so it's not like we're fixing anything. It's just preventive maintenance while we have it all apart anyway. We might as well service it, right? So that's it. We're about to clean it up a bit, and we are going to get started on this. So we decided to do this, really quick, to make a really quick video. And you can see, of course, we started out, to get the head off, and there's some components on there that need to come out. There was a release valve and a compression release. And a lot of the stuff, it looked, just original stuff on there. Not a whole lot of parts had been replaced. It looks like it was still all factory. And you can see where we got the head bolts off, and started working our way around and getting the compression release valve off. And the compression release, of course, it's there to ease the motor so that there's no compression when the motor first starts, and then as the flywheel, once it starts running, then it releases that compression release, and it starts pumping air like it should. So we got it off, and it was a needle valve, and you can see there's the needle and a spring that's in there. So we were careful not to lose any of that. And so we started, everything was off, and we started trying to get the head cover off, and it was pretty tight. There was some spots that was, the gasket had sealed really, really well, and but another part where it just popped right off. So we were able to get it loose, take it off, and doing it really slow so that we make sure we didn't knock anything loose, and give it a really quick inspection while we're looking at. And for the most part, it looked pretty good. There was not a whole lot of sludge, not a whole lot of oil in it. It's just a single cylinder.
Oh, no, it's two cylinders.
Yeah, so I just had to let you listen to that. Anything that sounded like a fart, it was worth listening to. So we can look at it and see the valves were working properly, and we started inspecting everything. There was no damage. There was no signs of any overheating or anything like that. Now, some of the gasket you can see had sealed really well, while part of it looked like it was getting ready to start bleeding through. But so I'm glad we got to do this preventive maintenance on there before anything bad happened to it. So but it did need some cleaning up for sure. So we just started with a little chisel and getting all the old gasket material off, and we spent quite a while doing this. I mean, we, you know, cleaned it up pretty well. Just got a lot, you know, just all the stuff off there, and taking our time, making sure we're not going to put any nicks or gouges in the in that cast metal. But it was cleaning up pretty nice. And I just have a little chisel that I use especially for this. I usually use a chisel or a razor blade, but the chisel was working nicely. And like I said, you know, we took our time because there was there's no gunk or oil or anything like that at all, and so there was no leaking, no nothing like that, and it was surprisingly clean. Of course, it's, you know, I'm used to doing a combustion engine, but with this, there's no combustion involved, so there's no carbon buildups or anything like that. So then we started getting the hose off it, you know, and then separating that valve plate, and looking at it, you know, you can see the cylinders, the pistons are great. Even the cylinders still have that cross hatching on it. So this has been serviced. We don't know how long ago, but it was definitely serviced, and you can see the gasket's even in great shape. So we decided, okay, that's as far as we're going to go. We're not going to, you know, dig down any further and put new piston rings or anything like that, because it looks like it was still in, you know, great shape. So we continued on, you know, getting the old gasket off and getting everything cleaned up. So while we're cleaning that up, and we're discussing, I guess during that time we're discussing, well, let's skip the piston rings. You know, we can see what we were in for, and just decided to start the massive cleanup. You can see he sprayed it down, and with a little wire brush, getting what little oil and junk that was on there and some of the surface rust, and it was looking pretty good. You know, because we were discussing, well, you know, do we want to, you know, really clean it up and paint it, or do you just want to clean it up and leave it like it is? But it was cleaning up so nice, and you can see when he starts to wipe it down, it was really looking pretty good. So we decided that's as far as we're going to go. So, and I kept cleaning off. You can see the head and the valve plate and all that good stuff. I had been cleaning all that off. Yeah, you can see how nice it's turning out. So we reached the point where it's all right. It's almost time for a reassembly here. So as we were looking too, we started looking at the flywheel, and it has those weights on there so that when it starts spinning, the weights start spreading out, and it activates that control arm for the compression release. And you can see, you know, we were just dousing it with WD-40 to make sure it was still moving freely. And you can see the weights. There's one on each side for a counterbalance. But you can see it's a really tight spring, but it's moving. And the only way to really test it, you know, after that, we don't know any specs, right? So we don't know what tension the spring's supposed to be, but we find out, you know, once it gets running, and when we turn it on with the flywheel spinning, we'll be able to see those weights and see if it's working well. So it was time for reassembly. We just aligned everything up, putting the gasket on, and there was no locating pins or anything, so you can see we just lined it up with the bolts, got everything lined up with the head plate, and then the valve plate, and then the head on it, and everything fit perfect. You know, sometimes you get gaskets in that are just not quite right, but these were a perfect fit. And before we put the head bolts on tight, you know, we decided to use some blue Loctite to make sure it's on there pretty good, and it won't back out, with vibration and all that good stuff. So we put the Loctite on all the head bolts and got everything tightened down. And I torqued them down in a cross pattern like you see, but I still like to do it by hand at the very last because you get a little more feel for it. We don't know what torque spec or anything it was supposed to be in, so we just use some common sense. And for that size of bolt, it needs to be fairly tight. And then we inserted the that compression release, the needle valve and everything. We decided to clean it up a little better, and before we inserted it in, to make sure it's going to seal and release properly. So we got everything put it on, and then the problem of alignment. Okay, looking at it horizontally and vertically. Okay, so we looked at the plane it should be in, but actually looking at it vertically, it wasn't an exact 90 degree. It ended up being about a degree off, and you can tell by when we were moving it down, and then we just started moving the valve back and forth, and until it was running, operating as smooth as possible. So it ended up being about a degree off, and then we got the that pipe back in place, and it was kind of a bear. It was a really tight fit through there, and it took a little muscle to get it on. But it went on no problem. Got everything torqued down, and then we started looking at on that compression release valve. So we went through a discussion on, well, how's this supposed to be working? Because for a minute it wasn't making sense. But so we discussed back and forth how it's supposed to operate, and we figured out that whoever did this before didn't have it adjusted correct. Because we were looking at it, the way the weights move out and the way it's supposed to be engaging that control arm, and it wasn't quite right. So we figured out that it was probably the flywheel. It just wasn't adjusted correctly, and so we looked at the flywheel, and it has a the key and everything on it, and it was a set screw. So we decided to look at the alignment of the flywheel, and we figured out that it's probably just wasn't set in properly, right? So we decided to loosen it up, and you can see the lengthy conversation we went through on how it should be operating. And that's when we figured out that it wasn't on there right, so we loosened up the flywheel, and it only took about 1/4 of an inch of moving it back. And you can see that top arm as we slowly tap the flywheel in. Like I said, it was only about 1/4 of an inch, but you can see how it starts to move out, and there's the gap. And there it goes. So now it looks like it's operating like it should. So when the weights start to move out, then that control arm, you'll see when I move these weights out here in a second. There you go. So I'll move the weights out, and you can see the arm actuating now. So we got that figured out, tightened everything back on. And that was kind of good, because that will definitely save the motor. That compression release is made so that, like I said, there's no compression when the motor first starts up. Because we already had to replace the motor about 6-8 months previous, and But now the motor starts up much easier, and then as it goes, But that's it. It turned out really nice. It cleaned up nice. We got everything operating the way it should, and it'll be trial and error, once we and make sure that valve is working properly. But we won't know until we start it up and get the RPMs up and make sure it's working. So, but that's it. I mean, the servicing is done. We'll probably change the oil before we start it out, although the oil looked pretty good. Looked actually pretty new. But we're going to start assembling the whole thing. Put the motor on, put the pump on, so that's that's going to be the next video. That's it. Well, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and watch for the next video on the final assembly of this compressor.